Silence can be the loudest headline of all, because when a public figure posts just one line about justice, then deletes it, then goes quiet, people do not simply move on. They lean in. They replay the timeline. They ask, why did a message of empathy suddenly become so sensitive? Tonight on Update X24's H, we are not here to push rumors. We are here to follow the signals, the official statements, the public reaction, and the curious ripple effect that followed Sun Lin's brief words after Menglong's passing. Some stories do not linger because they are dramatic, but because they feel incomplete. Menglong's passing belongs to this category. Weeks after the initial announcement, the public conversation has not naturally faded as many news cycles do. Instead, it continues to resurface quietly, shaped by reflection rather than outrage. At its core, this is not simply about how a public figure died. It is about how people process loss when information arrives in fragments. Official statements offered a conclusion, yet for many observers, that conclusion felt emotionally distant from the weight of the moment. When an explanation resolves a case procedurally but not emotionally, the story remains open in the public mind. For mature audiences especially, closure is not achieved through speed, but through coherence. People want to understand not only what happened, but why it makes sense. When those elements do not align, silence becomes louder than words. This is why the story refuses to close. It exists in the space between confirmation and comprehension, between fact and feeling. Until those two meet, the conversation continues, not out of defiance, but out of a deeply human need to make peace with loss. In today's media landscape, the public no longer waits passively for answers. The internet has transformed audiences into participants and sometimes into investigators. In the absence of detailed explanations, people instinctively turn to what is available: clips, screenshots, fragments of footage. What emerges is not necessarily truth, but interpretation. A pause becomes meaningful. An angle invites speculation. A moment frozen in time feels open to judgment. This behavior is not driven by malice, but by uncertainty. When clarity is limited, scrutiny intensifies. For older viewers, this phenomenon often feels unsettling. Many remember a time when official narratives were rarely questioned in public. Yet today, trust is negotiated rather than assumed. People ask, not because they want to accuse, but because they want reassurance. The frame-by-frame courtroom reflects a wider cultural shift. Information is no longer final. It is provisional. Viewers compare, analyze, and discuss, not to undermine authority, but to bridge a gap they feel internally. This is why such analysis spreads. It offers a sense of agency. Even if conclusions remain unverified, the process itself gives people the feeling that they are actively seeking understanding rather than accepting uncertainty in silence. Sun Lin's brief message stood out not because it was provocative, but because it was restrained. In a space dominated by speculation, her words carried a different tone, measured, empathetic, and deliberately open-ended. She did not assign blame. She did not challenge official conclusions directly. She acknowledged the emotional reality shared by many. That is precisely why it resonated. For audiences accustomed to carefully managed public statements, her message felt human rather than performative. It echoed a sentiment many people were experiencing quietly, that seeking clarity does not equal hostility, and that patience does not cancel the desire for justice. In mature cultures, particularly across East Asia, Europe, and North America, such indirect language carries weight. What is not said can matter more than what is said outright. Her sentence allowed space for reflection rather than confrontation. When a figure within the industry expresses empathy without escalation, it validates public feeling without inflaming it. That validation can be powerful. especially when emotions are restrained rather than loud. The impact of her words lies not in what they claimed, but in what they acknowledged, that unresolved questions are not unreasonable, and that dignity can coexist with doubt. In the digital age, deletion is rarely neutral. When a message disappears, it often creates more attention than the original post. Sunlin's decision to remove her statement transformed a single sentence into a broader discussion about boundaries, pressure, and vulnerability. Silence in this context was not interpreted as indifference. It was read as a response to an environment that had become uncomfortable. Whether that discomfort came from misunderstanding, online hostility, or caution, the result was the same. People noticed. For an older audience, this moment feels familiar. Many recognize the instinct to withdraw when a situation becomes volatile. Silence is sometimes chosen not because one is wrong, but because the cost of speaking feels too high. The removal of the post shifted the narrative. The focus moved away from the words themselves and towards the conditions under which public figures communicate. Why does empathy require caution? Why does restraint invite scrutiny? These questions linger not as accusations, but as reflections on modern discourse. When silence becomes a headline, it reveals how fragile public conversation has become and how easily good intentions can be misinterpreted in a heightened environment. In stories already marked by uncertainty, coincidence often feels heavier than it should. Later reports involving Sun Lin were not confirmed to be connected to her earlier post, yet they intensified a sense of unease that had already taken hold. This reaction says more about collective psychology than about events themselves. When emotions are heightened, people search for patterns. Even unrelated developments can feel symbolic when the atmosphere is tense. For many viewers, especially those with life experience, this creates discomfort rather than excitement. It raises quiet concerns about safety, pressure, and the unseen costs of visibility. The question is not, what does this mean, but why does this feel so heavy? In reflective cultures, such moments prompt caution. Observers become less interested in conclusions and more aware of context. They sense that something delicate is unfolding and that rushing to interpret it may do more harm than good. This is how a tense atmosphere forms, not from facts alone, but from the accumulation of unanswered questions. It does not demand belief, only awareness. And awareness, once present, is difficult to dismiss. Beyond the individuals involved, this story highlights a broader issue: trust. Modern audiences are surrounded by information, yet confidence in that information is increasingly fragile. Official statements, social media commentary, and algorithm-driven content coexist, often without alignment. This creates a quiet crisis. People are not rejecting authority outright. They are negotiating their relationship with it. They want transparency, but they also want reassurance that truth is not being simplified for convenience. For older generations, this shift can feel disorienting. Trust was once linear, earned through consistency. Today it is layered, shaped by credibility, tone, and perceived openness. The Menglong discussion reflects this tension. The public response is less about disagreement and more about uncertainty. Viewers ask themselves not who is right, but who understands what I am feeling. In this sense, the story is not unique. It is a mirror of how audiences engage with sensitive news in an era where clarity competes with speed and reassurance competes with speculation. Trust, once shaken, is slow to rebuild. If you found this discussion thoughtful and respectful, please consider subscribing to Update X in 24H. We cover major entertainment stories with balance, empathy, and clarity, so you can stay informed without being pulled into harmful speculation. Thank you for watching and for keeping the conversation humane. Until next time, take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next video on Update X24H.